You couldn't find an orange light bulb anywhere around.
Paulette Ferguson changed that, shedding light on a plea to find the man accused of killing Abby Williams and Libby German. She's the lady behind thousands of orange bulbs that will remain lit until an arrest is made.
I pray for the day we can just turn off our orange light bulbs and I don't have a party, throw them at something, or just to know that that monster is away and not ever going to do that again.
Soon after the Delphi investigation began on February 14th, Libby's mom began the orange bulb movement, drawing the attention of Paulette, who wanted to help. She emailed several companies. One company was willing to ship them, and she could sell them for $1. Another company, Westinghouse, agreed to send a semi with a surprising 2,500 bulbs. The only requirement, she could not sell them.
A lot of them are like, well, how much are they? And I said, they're free. And they looked at you like, no way.
Now people in Lafayette, Monticello, Buffalo, Delphi, and towns and cities in between illuminate their homes in orange.
When I see them all lit up, it's just, sometimes it's overwhelming. Living in a small town, you just never think anything like that would happen.
A bright gesture, marking a dark moment in time.
Welcome to Amber Light, where we keep the amber light bulb on our porches shining, just as you have seen here in the Delphi, Indiana area. I live close by, really ever since these murders of two little girls, Abby and Libby. A lot of neighbors had these orange or amber lights on their porches glowing. When you drove through the area at nighttime, it was just amazing to see all of the orange or amber light bulbs. And so hence the name of my channel, Amber Light, because the goal was to keep a light shining for justice on behalf of two innocent little victims that really sort of stole the hearts of lots of people locally and abroad. Here on Amber Light, I keep that light shining still. Now, there was an arrest made in the case, as everybody knows. You probably know this too. It's not brand new news. Richard Allen was arrested, tried, and convicted and sentenced to 130 years for the murders of these two little girls. But was justice served? It kind of depends on who you ask. The general population is very much divided on that question. Many people are in the camp of Richard Allen is guilty. Many others are in the camp of, hey, there's a lot of questions around this case. Now, I can't say one way or the other whether or not Richard Allen actually committed the murders. All I can say is that he was convicted by a jury of his peers with no reasonable doubt. He was found guilty. But I do still have a lot of questions about the case, especially as it relates to his constitutional rights as a defendant. We're going to get into that here. As a local, I was very interested when the trial started in November of 2024. Actually, October was jury selection, and watched it very closely, like a lot of people did. I was optimistic and excited about finally getting justice for the girls. Richard Allen had confessed. We understood, although we in the public didn't have the details. But he had confessed while he was incarcerated multiple times. I think I heard 61 times? 61 confessions? So I was convinced. In my mind, I was like, why would anybody confess to a crime if they didn't do it? He was guilty. And I was excited as the trial hit so that we could finally get justice for the little girls. However, as the trial went on, and the trial was done very secretly, no media was allowed, no cameras, no audio, nothing was released from the trial to the public other than third parties who were present, members of the public, and media. Many podcasters, many YouTubers were there and documented what had happened. And one of the things that I was really surprised to learn was how Richard Allen was treated shortly after his arrest. Due to a safekeeping order that was issued by the Carroll County judge and the sheriff, Tobe Lesenby, at the time, Richard Allen ultimately was moved and incarcerated in the Westville prison system. He was put into solitary confinement while there. Now, keep in mind, here is a pre-trial detainee. He is innocent until proven guilty. And now he is thrust into a horrible place. One of the people who were live at the trial was Andrea Burkhart. And she, in a video before she made the trip, she was talking to her listeners about why she was going to Delphi so that she could document the trial. She had some concerns also as a defense attorney, and she wanted to do her best to share what was happening behind closed doors, so to speak. Here are some of her concerns relative to his immediate incarceration.
The second reason I thought it was very important for me to follow this case is because the hostility to the defense has gone far beyond what I consider to be kind of normal and routine. And so I want to go ahead and give you some examples of what's happened in the case that really illustrates that in my mind. So, first off, when Mr. Allen was first arrested, the state contended that the local county jail, Carroll County Jail, wasn't able to keep him safe if he were to be housed there. Now, normally, somebody gets charged with a crime in a state court. Yeah, you can be held without bail, or if you're unable to meet bail in the local jail while you're waiting for trial. That's fairly normal, especially for people who lack resources to post large amounts of bail and so forth. But the jail in this case said they couldn't guarantee Mr. Allen would be safe in their jail. So instead, he was held in a state prison. And not only was he held in a state prison, he was held in the isolation unit of a state prison. So Mr. Allen, with no criminal history of any kind, goes from going about his day-to-day life, going to his job at CVS, normal, routine, everyday things, to suddenly being held in isolation, surrounded by some of the state's most dangerous criminals, in the area of the prison where the people who are most violent, most unpredictable, most defiant are being held. This is a punitive unit. But in Mr. Allen's case, according to the state, this was necessary to be able to keep him safe. Well, if you know much about isolation units, this is something that you've ever looked into. They are extremely psychologically damaging. There's very good evidence that extended isolation will drive any human being crazy. We are social beings. We're programmed biologically to need to be around others, to have contact from others. And so taking that away, putting somebody in an environment where their movement is restricted, their contacts are restricted, and they have very little in the way of entertainment, anything to occupy your mind. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can imagine how, as the hours go on, turn into days, turn into weeks, the type of effect that this would have on somebody and the lengths that your brain would go to try to keep you active, keep you entertained, keep you sane. In this particular case, it appears that those conditions did indeed wear on Mr. Allen, because within a few months, the defense had filed a motion indicating that his condition was deteriorating rapidly and asking for this order, this safekeeping order that committed him to the Indiana prison, that be modified. The state also filed some documents where it indicated likewise, seemingly fully conceding, yeah, Mr. Allen is losing his function. He's displaying psychotic symptoms. They reported he was eating his legal paperwork. But according to the state, these things, were probably because, over the course of multiple calls from this prison to his wife, they allege Mr. Allen then confessed to these crimes. So presumably this will be evidence that the state will attempt to use at trial to further inculpate Mr. Allen, to argue, well, he confessed during his incarceration.
So, as Andrea raised her concerns about the treatment of Richard Allen after he had been incarcerated, I wanted to kind of show this to you. This is from the United Nations website, the United Nations Human Rights Office of the Higher Commissioner. And the headline here is United States prolonged solitary confinement amounts to psychological torture, says UN expert. This was published in February of 2020, so it is a relatively recent finding. There's a lot here. You can take a look at this website. I'll put a link to it in the description below. But I've got this section highlighted that I wanted to share with you. Speaking of solitary confinement, these dehumanizing conditions of detention, sometimes euphemistically referred to as segregation, secure housing, the hole, or lockdown, are routinely used by U.S. correctional facilities, particularly against inmates designated as high risk due to previous gang affiliations, behavior abnormalities, or mental conditions. These practices trigger and exacerbate psychological suffering, in particular in inmates who may have experienced previous trauma or have mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities, Meltzer noted. The severe and often irreparable psychological and physical consequences of solitary confinement and social exclusion are well documented and can range from progressively severe forms of anxiety, stress, and depression to cognitive impairment and suicidal tendencies. This deliberate infliction of severe mental pain or suffering may well amount to psychological torture. So that's the concern here from my perspective, and others too. Whether or not Richard Allen is guilty is beside the point. The fact that he, after his arrest, while he is a pre-trial detainee, under the auspices of a self-protection, safekeeping kind of order here, is put into solitary confinement for many, many, many months, to the point where he suffers a mental breakdown, a documented state of psychosis, and is now confessing to these crimes. Somebody said, "We are all Richard Allen." And I think that's a great point. Do we really want our government treating citizens this way? Another resource that might be helpful is to go out and look at the Innocence Project website. They have a link on their page that talks about false confessions. And that's what I have pulled up here. I'll put a link again to this website in the description too. But here, generally, false confessions occur more than most people think and result from a variety of factors, including the use of coercive and deceptive tactics during an interrogation. It goes on. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but it does kind of talk about the increased stress, mental exhaustion, promises of lenient sentences or challenges with understanding their constitutional rights, all of those are factors into false confessions. The way that the state of Indiana treated Richard Allen is so very, very unique that solitary confinement is not mentioned here as a source for false confessions. Generally speaking, pretrial detainees are never put into solitary confinement, which amounts to psychological torture, which resulted in this case, a very well documented, even the state's witness, Dr. Walla, confirmed that Richard Allen was in a state of psychosis. So that, to me, brings these confessions into question. Can they really be trusted? So at the beginning of this video, I mentioned the fact that, being a local, somebody who really cares about justice for Abby and Libby, that I was ready for the trial to begin, and I was convinced. He confessed, therefore he must be guilty. Yet, the more that I've learned here around solitary confinement and what that can do for the validity of confessions, in the way that he was put into by a safekeeping order, an order that was intended to keep him safe and from harm, may have actually harmed him and damaged him to the point where he's making confessions that probably don't hold a lot of weight. Very, very concerning. One juror has come public with one of the other YouTube channels and noted that the confession was the key piece of evidence that helped them to decide to render a guilty verdict. So it makes me wonder, is there cause for doubt here? Reasonable doubt? I certainly think so. And this also causes me to keep that amber light burning still, because I'm not convinced that we have justice for Abby and Libby. Thanks for watching, and please, if you get a chance, like, subscribe, share, and in the meanwhile, keep that porch light burning for justice.